Hi, I'm Paul Friedman, founder of the Marriage Foundation, and as usual, we're going to treat this subject in a way that most people won't. The subject is, these are the 10 most disgusting behaviors that destroy relationships. And it's going to be in 2 parts, so it doesn't take too long on one video. So here we go. Number 1. And this almost is number 1, and that is complaining. You know, we take it for granted that we should be able to complain about things if we're not happy. In fact, if you were to go to marriage counseling, and I do not recommend marriage counseling at all, what you will learn are quote-unquote correct ways of complaining. So let me tell you why complaining fails, why it doesn't work. And you already know this, but the problem is when we think about things, we never think about what happens if the shoe is on the other foot. So think about yourself not as the complainer, because you have just cause, just reason to complain about something, but think about yourself as the complainee. How does it feel? Well, it's usually something that has happened in the past. There's nothing you can do about it, and so at a minimum, it's frustrating. Now, if your spouse is complaining about a trait that you have, and you're not aware of this trait, it means that you're not really ready to deal with it. Once again, it's frustrating. Now put yourself back in the other shoes, and remember you're the complainer now, and you're trying to complain to your spouse about something. Why? Well, you could say you're frustrated. You don't like something. It makes you uncomfortable. It gets you pissed. It makes you feel this. It makes you feel that. Well, really, by your own repositioning yourself, you realize that your complaining isn't going to change anything. All it's going to do is frustrate, aggravate, tee off your spouse. So the question is, well, then what do I do? Do I just live with it? Well, what does that mean, just live with it? So I'm going to give you really deep insight into how your mind works and how you're not fully utilizing it in your marriage. And it's not your fault. We are not taught that we should be mastering our minds. We're not taught how our minds actually work. So I'm going to give you a lesson. And this is a valuable lesson. We as individuals, we have free will. We basically can do anything that we want. Unfortunately, we use that free will to operate whimsically. Well, I feel like doing this, and so I will. This is called desultory living, when we should be living in a way, in our marriage especially, in a way that creates happiness. You want to be happy. It creates love. You want to feel love in your marriage. So we've already determined that if you behave by complaining, it isn't going to do that. Well, then what do? Now here's the part about the mind that you may have not thought about, but when I share this with you, it will make total sense. When we perceive things physically with our senses, what's happening is energy is going out, for instance, from our eyes or from our ears, and it hits something, and that energy comes back, and it's neutral. It has no good, bad, tastes good, feels bad, feels good. It doesn't have any of those things until it hits filters in your mind that you have subconsciously, for the most part, set up. Does this make sense to you? Do you understand this? Because this is deep stuff. Clinically, scientifically, what I'm sharing with you is absolutely accurate. Anything that we perceive with our senses, we're perceiving neutrally. It has no value. But our mind, by virtue of our own free will, our own desires, we perceive things in a particular way based on what we choose. So, why is this important to you in your marriage? It's important to you because whatever your spouse is doing is seen or heard or felt by you according to your habit. And you have the ability to stop this filter and take in the information and give it a different context. Now, why is this so useful? Because maturity means you are not reacting. Spiritual maturity means that you're an observer of life. You're an observer of everything, and your response will always be positive, which means you don't have to complain about anything. A, it doesn't do any good. B, it doesn't change your spouse's behaviors. C, it doesn't make them feel guilty or sad or contrite for what they have done. And most importantly, it does not contribute to the happiness of your marriage. Now, what I've just given you is deep stuff. I've actually gone into it almost as deeply as in the courses that we have when you're having trouble with your marriage. We have courses at the Marriage Foundation. So understand this. This is good, useful information that we don't get anywhere else. And that's why you should subscribe to this channel, by the way. Number 2, another disgusting behavior that destroys relationships is criticizing. Criticizing is effectively telling your spouse that they do not please you. You see, in your mind, the criticizing is like doing them a favor. We have in our world accepted this term, critical, what is it called? Positive criticism? Constructive criticism. Constructive criticism is nonsense. It isn't true. There is no such thing as constructive criticism. Now, we may want to show our spouse a better way. However, it will still be taken by them as criticism. So the question is that loving? I'll take it a step further. Is it necessary? Or do we go back to the earlier explanation of how your mind works? And do we say, you know what? I don't really need to criticize them about this. This is not that big a deal. What's wrong with me that I'm so sensitive that I have to criticize the person I love for behaving in a way they're behaving? They're not perfect. You knew they weren't perfect when you met them. You knew they weren't perfect when you dated them. You knew they weren't perfect when you courted, when you got engaged, and now you're married and you expect perfection. It's crazy. It's disgusting. It's not nice. Bite your tongue rather than criticize. Number 3, porn use. You knew I'd get to this one, didn't you? Now, we also have a good article. I wrote a good article about porn use, and you can find it by typing in Paul Friedman porn addiction. Doesn't mean that Paul Friedman is addicted to porn. Paul Friedman doesn't use porn. Just because you hear that, oh, everybody uses porn, it isn't true. It undermines your own integrity because it is a form of infidelity. It undermines your relationship because you're putting energy into fantasy women. Women don't go to porn typically. Very, very few. I think when they talk about the percentage of women who use porn, they're lying. I think it's much lower. It's not a female thing to use porn. Now, is it something to be ashamed of? I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to tell you that porn use is robbing your marriage. And it's disgusting because this is important. Because again, it's not condemnation. Please don't take it as condemnation. I understand how porn is sold to us. It's turned into like a great thing. You know, you hear, oh, well, him using porn means that he could stay in his marriage longer. Him using porn means that he's not laying his trips on his wife. Him using porn means that he's not grabbing her and taking advantage and God knows what else. But here's the problem with porn use. It's a misunderstanding of what sex is, basically. And when you go to porn, what you're doing is reducing yourself. You see, as human beings, now get this, this is again deep stuff. You are essentially a soul. You're a soul. And you take on this human form. You see, you don't have a soul. This is a misunderstanding. You actually are a soul. And you become a human being. And then you become a man. But you're still a soul. Now, when you become a man, you become one because you've created for yourself a man's physical body. That physical body is biological. Biological means that every single cell innately has the drive to survive. The drive to survive is all about survival on one level, which means avoiding danger and looking for opportunity. But then there's a subordinate part to this drive to survive, procreation. It's still tied in. We procreate in order to have more of us. It creates safety. But we don't do it as human beings. That's the animal part of us. When we live in the world, when we live, we have a choice because we have free will. We could raise our consciousness out of the primal, and we should. Because A soul is pure joy, pure love. That's what your true nature is. But when you come down and you take care of the body's needs, you're fully absorbed in it, and you lose sight of your true nature. Now, this is a very deep topic, and it gets much deeper than that, but I gave you the thumbnail of what's going on. As a human being, you can choose. You could live in the primal, and those who live purely in the primal, where they're just responding to their body's needs, which is very selfish, it's all about survival, those are usually psychopaths. Then most people live on the mundane plane, where they're just living and living and living. And once in a while they get a taste of love. Now that taste of love is who you actually are. But you don't see it because you haven't trained yourself to live in the soul level. But your marriage is supposed to be lived at the level of the soul, and sex is supposed to be used at that level. When you go to porn, you're just pushing all of that off the table. And it's a waste. It is mostly a waste of happiness. Next, number 4, is arguing. Now, don't argue with me about this. There's an old saying, fools argue, the wise discuss. Now, I know in this day and age where, and I'm not big on Western psychology, I admit it, because I think they leave out the spiritual aspect of us. And they shortchange us. They don't think we are capable of living a higher life. So people who go to marriage counseling, and I know about this because I used to be a divorce mediator, and I got my clients from marriage counselors. And some people go to marriage counselors, believe it or not, to learn how to argue. It's insane. Why would you argue with the person you love? Talk about going in 2 different directions at the same time. Your whole marriage should be about loving each other, giving each other, taking care of each other, being sweet to each other, being supportive, loving. Doesn't include arguing. Number 5, confronting. You know, again, I mean, I hate doing these comparisons, but it's true. Western psychologists say, well, confront him. This is mostly, we get emails all the time. At the Marriage Foundation, you could go to our site, and there is a tab for Ask a Counselor. It's a free service. And all the time, a woman will write in, and she will say, I discovered my husband has been sexting. I saw it on his phone, and I confronted him about it, and blah, blah, blah. Well, we already know what he did. Why? Because when someone is confronted, you too, our walls go up, and we do one of only a few things. We attack, offense is the best defense. We run, which means we lie about it. We twist things around and go, well, how about you, blah, 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 it's your fault. Confrontation never works. And that's why you don't do it. It's disgusting to do things that have an adverse effect on your marriage. So this is part 1. The next video is part 2. Hopefully you'll want to go further. I'm saving the best for last. And there's so much to learn about marriage. Again, I'm Paul Friedman, founder of the Marriage Foundation. God bless you, and see you in the next video. Take care.